When you wrote Remains of the Day, I remember you're talking about how even though you looked to a very particular time and place in England, that it wasn't so much a quintessential British novel that interested you, but rather the failure of emotion, that it was a study of the failure of emotion. Why do you think that's been your theme back then in the early days of your fiction?
Well, the failure of emotion was only part of it. I'd say it wasn't just. Well, I went into this novel thinking about two things, and I thought the butler, the figure of the butler, could fulfill both of those things. One of them is what you just said. Maybe not the failure of the emotions, but maybe the fear of emotions, or the fear of the arena of the emotions. I thought the archetypal figure, the English butler, which I didn't know actually. I didn't personally know any English butlers. I didn't have a historical interest in kind of English butlers, but we all know. I mean, certainly we did then. I think people still know the kind of the general stereotype of the English butler, what the English butler stands for. We've seen the figure of the English butler almost like a comic figure. This very stoic, stiff upper lip figure. We've seen that figure recur in movies and plays and books for decades, and this is a figure that's known all around the world. People who never set foot in England have an idea of what the English butler might be like. And so I thought I would use this internationally well-known stereotype to go into these two things. I thought this figure could very well stand for that part of all of us that's actually afraid to get engaged, afraid to open ourselves to love and to the possibilities of being loved, the dangers of becoming emotionally engaged, and hiding instead behind some sort of professional role. Okay, so that was one of the things that the figure of the butler offered me. But I thought at the same time, the butler figure allowed me to do something else that was, for me, absolutely central to what I wanted to do in the novel. I wanted to suggest that in some kind of way, in a political way, perhaps a political and moral way, most of us were butlers. But by which I mean that we even in democratic countries where we have some kind of say in how the country is run, we find ourselves oddly far removed from real power. Most of us, what we do is we do jobs. We do good jobs, little jobs, but most of us don't run countries. Most of us don't run multinational corporations. We fit in somewhere if we're lucky. We learn to do a little job, and we try and do our little job to the best of our ability, and we usually offer up our contribution to somebody upstairs. We hope that the contribution is going to be used well, but we often can't be sure. We offer it up to a company or an employer or maybe a cause or a country. But in that sense, I thought we are all rather like butlers. And so I was attracted to this person, this figure who wanted to be this kind of so good at being a butler. Everything was about serving his employer, but he thought it was beyond him to question, how his contribution was being used. But of course, that leaves us all open to discovering at some stage that we've perhaps contributed to something we don't particularly approve of. But most of us, that is our fate. We live in small worlds. We don't get to choose, often, how our little contribution, however proud we are of it, however much dignity and pride we try and take from our contribution, we offer it to somebody up there, and it gets used in a slightly mysterious way, and it's kind of out of our control, politically and morally. So the figure of the butler, I thought, served metaphorically very well for those two things. The political and moral state of being a butler. We're all butlers in a way, and we're also all English butlers because I think, all to a greater or lesser extent, we fear the world of the emotions, the realm of the emotions. But we know that we've got to expose ourselves to hurt and emotional hurt if we want some of the kind of the really rich things in life that come out of relationships. But it's a scary place.
Because with Stevens, it's not, and with